meeting. So I want to call to order the meeting for the Parent Advisory Committee. Um, I always forget the last part for the distribution of, uh, sorry, having Kendrick in my lap and trying to conduct this meeting has my brain everywhere. So I am going to call to order the Parent Advisory Committee distribution of donations for staffing. Our first order of business today will be to um, adopt the meeting minutes from last March. It was March 26th, which we're finding we don't necessarily have to do, but we'll go ahead and keep our tradition going this year. Um, do does anyone want to um, approve the meeting minutes?
Yes.
And Suzanne, would you like to second?
I'll second that.
Thank you so much.
So, the next thing on the agenda is the Board of Education update, we were just going to kind of report on how the vote went when we presented, and then they voted. We presented in April, they voted in May, which is customary to wait 30 days. And I also added the high impact tutoring update. Emily Glasgow is going to try to join us and give a little overview of that. I think I might have told her she could join at 5:45. So, but would love to hear if Trina or Suzanne, if you have any reflections that you want to share on when we presented to the Board of Education or on the vote, or anything else related to kind of like what has happened since we started meeting with this.
I think the board was just really pleased with what our group came to, and that was um, very exciting because it could have gone a totally different direction. Yeah, but they were unanimously pleased with what we landed on. I'm still confused about the timeline of how this rolls out going forward. Not the allocation of funds, but the PAC planning process. And I think a lot of people are still in the community confused about it. And I think that not only delays the success of this, but it could actually really hurt the success of transitioning to a district-wide fund. So what I'm seeing and hearing about are the foundations are just shifting their fundraising to their school PTAs. And part of that is because of lack of communication about what's been going on with the PAC. And then I saw the flyers that were put together. They look great. I'm curious about uh, like I think there are some schools that didn't know that don't know their high impact tutoring is coming from this, that they're receiving their high impact tutoring because of the district-wide fund. And then there are others that are wondering why they're not getting it. And I think the more transparent PPS can be about that, the better. Even though it may not want to tell school X that it's not getting high impact tutoring because there are so many other schools that have higher needs. I think that transparency is hugely important to the success of this.
Yes, so the two flyers that are on our webpage were shared with principals, and it was requested that they share them with their school communities. We uh, also offered to come to PTA meetings, but I think that timing is a little challenging with it being the end of the school year um, for doing that. But we are planning to continue doing more social media posts and like messaging out, and then more in person. Um, the presentations, going to schools so that, we know that that's where they're hearing information. A lot of conversations are happening. We also are working on a communication plan with our principals, because we think part of the challenge is around how them understanding and communicating the opportunity. It um, Yeah, because there's a lot of kind of like focus within the schools and not as much, kind of on this broader um, community impact, and how the funding. Yeah, I don't think it's not, the $660,000 for high impact tutoring is not paying for all of the high impact tutoring, but it enabled them to like more double the number of schools that were able to receive it. And that message has not, been taken in a way of saying like, oh, in that case, we ought to support this. And that's really the opportunity that we see for the fall of kicking things off and fundraising um, to get people engaged and having like things for them to do to come and be a part of. Um, so we yeah, had this feeling that we were going to be playing catch up because of the timeline. This was part of why we moved so quickly and trying to make our decision. And now we're kind of in that place of late May, and, people have one foot out the door, and it's kind of hard to get our message out right now. But we are hopeful that if by planting these seeds and then working like both with PTAs and principals, that we could begin to like get more traction and involvement of the community, which is essential for this to continue to be successful. Yeah.
And then the other comment I had was that, and you probably know this, Robin, but uh, Trina and Son might not be aware, but I did submit an email to the board because there are a number of PTA websites and also foundation websites that make it appear, well, first for the PTA websites, some of what they're advocating is in violation of our policy that was passed. An example was a PTA that was specifically requesting that parents donate a certain amount of money for the year. And the policy explicitly says that that's not permitted. And then the other thing is that there are a lot of foundation pages that have been updated and provide an explanation as to why they don't exist anymore. But there are, like, Alameda's foundation page hasn't changed at all. So if I'm a new Alameda parent, I immediately start questioning, why can't I do this? And I think I think it would be worthwhile for the PPS to web development communications department to do a clean sweep, so that the only information that parents are being fed is factual information, not misleading about their opportunities for fundraising and where those funds go.
Mhm.
I don't know how hard that is to do. Um, but I am referring to, I mean, yeah, I'm sure some of those pages are privately run and not on the PPS.net
Mhm. Yeah.
system.
Yes, and part of that we are trying to address through having uh, more of a registration process so that we would have like all people submit all those links, of where their websites are and what, because otherwise it becomes like a big research project too of like searching and like some schools have multiple, different things happening and they're not, yeah. Um, but there is one thing in the policy that refers to if school-based fundraising groups raise more than $20,000, that they should register with the district. So that we're working on that process and um, making that available and encouraged for all groups, you know. Um, so that is in process as well.
Why 20 and not 15? Do you know? Because isn't 15 for our policy is the requirement where we have a $15,000 cutoff in our policy.
Yeah, yeah, there's kind of two different amounts listed in there for different things. Hmm. Yeah, but we are trying to clean some of that up and have there be more explanation because some of those are just one sentence and it's not.
Mhm.
So that would be in the administrative directive, would have more detail. Um, and we can encourage more, so we meet the policy, but we can also try to encapsulate the whole district in it.
And where will the administrative directive reside? Is that going to be a document?
Yes, those are posted on the board policy page as well, but they're developed by staff and the legal and the superintendent approval. So it takes a bit to get it wordsmithed and approved.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I had a quick question. Just looking at the various websites, it seems like Champion PPS Schools is kind of a new branding for the fund. Is that what's happening?
Yeah, so that is to have, that would be the parent, the fundraised dollars that would go towards this district-wide fundraising effort. Um, and so because the fund for PPS has been raising money in multiple ways and so that will continue, but then this is the umbrella where would all the parent fundraising and donations would go through. So that's the effort to try to make that fully transparent of like what all the dollars that come in that way will go towards this. But I do think it's going to take a minute for people to understand, and we need to like explain it a little more clearly. We're working on some graphics and things to, at a glance, make it simpler to understand. Um, well, since Emily was able to join us, I wanted to maybe share more, allow her to share an update on the high impact tutoring. You, uh, Emily, I shared with them the flyer that went out to our schools, and so that is posted on the PAC website as so I could share my screen if you wanted to speak to that more specifically, or just however you would like to go.
Yeah, that would be terrific if you could share your
Okay.
screen so I have that right in front of me. But I mean, it sounds like Robin's already shared that. So I'm happy to answer any follow-up questions you guys have, or at least try to.
So we talked a bit about, just needing to get more principals and parent communities and PTAs to understand like what this means and how, in order to continue this, we will need ongoing investment. So that was
Mhm.
what we
Okay.
talked about before you joined.
Okay.
And there's, a few schools that are not elementary schools that are not currently funded here. And so there's some conversation about that online, which I'm not really part of those.
Yeah. And I would
But
say there's a group of schools missing from this flyer. So there are another, I'm worried about having my exact numbers right. I want to say 8 schools who are not listed on here, who we are in the process of contracting for like a pilot high impact tutoring program for their schools. They are schools that have less academic need, or I should say less unserved academic need. So we used like a pretty detailed data formula to look at in every school how many kids are in need of what we call tier 2 and 3 literacy intervention in grades K through 3 or first through third grade in particular. And what intervention resources does that school already have? Like what FTE have we already given them to provide intervention in that school? And then where's the gap? And so in some schools, there was a very large gap. And so the largest gap got the reading results program, which is the most intensive. It'll serve the most kids. We had to do a slightly different version for our Spanish DLI schools because that intervention needs to happen in Spanish and reading results doesn't do that. So we're doing kind of a more homegrown model there. And then those 6 schools that are getting the one reading support educational assistant, their gap was smaller, but still large enough that having that like kind of designated FTE with that trained EA to do high impact tutoring will help meet a need that isn't currently being met there. And then there's this other bundle of schools who have even a smaller gap than that. And really, it's more of just like there's a handful of individual kids who could benefit from an individual license for an individualized high impact tutoring model that we're going to pilot. And so we are also doing that, which really only leaves, I want to say, 3 of our 59 elementary schools without some version of district sponsored high impact tutoring next year, which is really exciting given the financial situation our district is in. And that's in large part because of the decision you guys made as a team. So thank you. High impact tutoring is like a very research-based strategy that's very targeted with a really tight curriculum, tight assessment, tight data monitoring. So we feel really excited about being able to reach this many schools and this many kids in the coming year. Suzanne and Sun, in any order, I see questions.
I'll go first. Emily, for the schools that are that are partnering with reading results, do they all get the same amount of assistance, or does that vary within even those schools?
It's a good question. Like historically, yes, like reading results was a particular model. Individual schools contracted with them, and it meant, I think 24 student slots per year. That doesn't mean 24 kids because kids may graduate in and out of the program and not need it anymore. And then other students may need it more. In some schools, they start with first through third grade and then halfway through the year add kindergartners in and graduate some third graders. So the total number of kids served may vary. We are, now that we're partnering with reading results centrally and doing this like central allocation based on our data analysis, there has been some conversation around, should it be the same in every school? Like, does that match the need in every school? Or should there be, more reading results tutors in one school and less in another school? And I don't know that we've completely landed that. We're still in those conversations. But I think the kind of like that average range number is 24 seats for students that go through over the course of the year.
And then Emily, my question was that, when the high impact tutoring was presented to the group, it had originally said, looking at the flyer, K-3. But then when I look at the flyer we're going to present for it, I notice it says K-2, K through second grade.
Yeah, that's a good catch. I don't know why it is K-3. And again, typically it'll start first through third grade because we don't typically start intervention with kindergartners that haven't had any core instruction yet. We give them at least half a year to get the instruction under their belt and figure out like who may not be absorbing that at the rate we expect. So I'm not sure why it says that. We are including third graders.
Okay, so maybe it's just something we just need to edit on that flyer.
Yeah, and Robin, I don't know how we didn't all catch that collectively.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Should we take off the kindergarten too then? Just say 1 through
Well,
3?
because it may serve kindergartners too. Again, it's like over the course of the year, like the school engages in data cycles. And again, a school might also decide, hey, like our second grade is really impacted and has a huge number of kids. And so we're going to do more second grade and less. I mean, those are decisions that are data-based at each site. So I would include the range as K-3.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then the one other thing on the flyer I noticed was in the second section where it says 9 Spanish dual language immersion schools will have 2 reading support educational assistants, bilingual English and Spanish. Like, should there be an in bilingual English and Spanish? Is there like a word missing?
Oh, can you put it back up, Robin? I would need to look at it to. Yeah, or at least a comma or something, right? I could see that it feels like something is missing there, right? Or a dash or a comma or something. Is that what you're to like?
It seems like something's
Yeah.
missing
Yeah,
grammatically,
I appreciate that.
and then just the
Yeah,
irony, since it's a literacy thing that we're trying to promote.
good point. We don't want typos in our literacy documents or any documents. Yeah, I could see that could be more clear, or it could be in parentheses, like somehow setting that aside. And I think especially if folks don't understand the dual language immersion model as much, understanding that especially in kindergarten and first grade, most of the literacy instruction kids are receiving is in Spanish. So you would want their tutoring to be in Spanish as well, right? And then it starts to kind of gradiate and progress into a little more English in second, third, and beyond. Suzanne, go ahead.
What's the difference between a reading support educational assistant and just a regular EA?
So it's pretty different. I would say a regular EA is hired by and supervised and directed by the school principal. And their responsibilities can be pretty vast, right? They can do everything from supporting small groups in the classroom to working with individual students that are struggling to engage in the classroom, to lunch and recess duty, to, like they're full-time members of the staff and they're used in a lot of different ways. Whereas these educational assistants are very specifically hired and trained to do high impact tutoring, and that's all they do. They come just for the 2 or 3 hour block when they're going to be doing 30-minute sessions back to back with the kids that they see, and all they're doing is high impact tutoring and progress monitoring of the results of that. So it's a much more targeted role. And one that we have, sort of we can centrally set parameters around and support training and all that.
Will we be able to show the outcomes or improvements and tie them to the additional funding that the PAC brought to the table?
We should. I mean, it's a little bit complex. Like we absolutely can show the progress that students engaged in PPS high impact tutoring are making. Sussing out which of those kids is directly funded by the dollars you gave or which of those sites is trickier, right? Because we're braiding in several different sources. But your funding at this point is the largest piece of the pie going into high impact tutoring next year. So and the team that runs this program is pretty good at data and pretty good at, they've got tight assessment. I think they'll be able to show you over the course of the year how the outcomes are looking.
Would it be possible to quantify going into next year how much money would be needed to make X amount of improvement from next year's improvement? Like,
That's a good
again, as
question.
Robin mentioned, we're trying to figure out how to
Yeah,
increase contributions to fund
yeah.
programs like this.
It's a good question. I think we could put our brains together and think about the best way to package the information we have. You know, we'll know how many kids are being served. We'll know how much academic growth they made related to the assessments that they're taking pre and post as part of this tutoring work. We'll know how many schools we're touching. We'll know how many classrooms we're touching. Right? Like we can quantify it in lots of different ways and figure out how to tell the story. And then, you know, I think the other piece of this story, or, you know, there's several pieces, but another piece of this story is that our district is continuing to fund literacy interventionists in most of our elementary schools. And I don't know what the future of that will hold. And I really don't know. I'm not like projecting something, but, you know, as we look at future reductions, some of the schools that currently have interventionists who are holding down some of this need may not a year from now or 2 years from now. And so that also points to like the continued need of having something in this space where we're giving kids who are not quite yet at grade level that intervention and support they need, right? So I think we'll have to talk about all those pieces, like as we, and our team can be thought partners with folks on your team who are working on marketing. I know they're working on sort of how to sell the story. And happy to provide you with the information that makes sense to help do that. I think, I mean, I actually had a great opportunity to go with my team to a conference at Stanford. Maybe it's been about a month now, but it was a national conference on high impact tutoring. And the research is really exciting. And it is something that districts all around the country are figuring out creative ways to fund despite everyone in the country facing significant financial reductions because it is so research-based and targeted and clear and for the kids who most need it. And so that's also like, we can also share that kind of information if that's helpful to tell the story. Because again, districts all over the country are losing a lot of things, but holding on to this. So.
Yeah, I wonder, it's really good to have numbers. Like we know we're contributing 660,000, and that's part of the 45 schools that are receiving the high impact tutors. It's a portion of it, and you can do the simple math and figure out what the other dollars amount to. But having that full picture of like going into next year for the next parent advisory committee, at a minimum, we want to hit this, and at our like the most awesome goal would be to hit this, like to maintain, and then I also wonder with the cuts that you mentioned, because PPS is facing 40 million in cuts, and hopefully the state legislature won't reduce that further, and we won't know that till June. But is it possible that this number could shrink before September, from 45 to fewer schools?
No,
Okay.
I don't know. I think we're locked in, and it's actually more than 45 again. It's I want to say it's 55 in total that are getting some
Okay.
level of PPS sponsored high impact tutoring.
Oh, great.
No, because the funding sources are the PAC funds, a little bit of funding from the Early Literacy Success Grant through ODE, and a little bit of general fund, but that's the smallest piece of the pie.
And there may be a way to represent the percentage of the money that came from the PAC when we report back on the dollars, you know,
Yep.
without naming
Yeah,
certain
like some kind of
schools.
simple pie chart, and we could show results by model, because we're also always interested from a continuous improvement standpoint on which model is most effective and why, and all that learning, right? So because we want continued investments to go into, you know, where we're getting the most bang for our buck. So yeah, Robin, we can keep working with you on that.
And I think that maybe coming up with what that looks like and having the committee look at that in early fall to understand will help us in the messaging, because I think that uh, we need our community to understand that if they want these to continue in the following year, they need to join our effort. And that if setting an abstract goal of 4 million so that every school can have a 0.5 EA is probably not the most strategic goal right now. And we want to give this an opportunity to succeed. And we think it's exciting, innovative, and has data behind it. So you want to speak to that a bit, Emily?
Yeah, well, and we'll have this year's data, right? We are currently doing high impact tutoring. And so we can use this year's outcome data and then tell a story with next year's investments and how, how many schools it's touching, how many kids it's touching. And then by, winter, we'll have some outcomes from next year that we can add to the story. So there should be plenty of information to build a compelling case, I hope.
I don't know if there's a wall between, I know there's a wall between the fund for PPS and PPS, but to the extent that the high impact tutoring provider or PPS staff responsible for high impact tutoring can communicate to the schools often, the role of the district-wide fund in making this happen will just come back. It will bring so much returns, I think, and to what Robin was talking about and gaining support so that we could even grow this program.
Yeah, I think we can think about how to do that. And if there's particular, Robin, you can share with us if there's particular marketing or slogans or images or things that should go on communications to families, for example, who are receiving tutoring, or how we can talk about that.
Yeah, we had some ideas around like did you know, kind of giving people tidbits of information, and maybe even if PPS Communications would reshare all of those kinds of posts and things like that too. It can be more global.
Yeah.
Um,
Could also do
so-
some testimonials or videos of tutoring in action if there's permissions for that, testimonials of parents or tutors who are seeing success, or principals or teachers who are grateful for the support in their schools, right? Like I think there would be lots of ways to tell the story because it's very tangible. It's kids receiving a very direct service, 3 times a week during the school day. So
And I think getting those teachers from different schools or parents from different schools together to relay that message instead of at individual schools would be really powerful also, because it supports the idea of we're doing this as a district, not as individual schools.
it's great.
Yeah, there was an interest in having a video. We need and graphics and simple ways for people to grasp like what's happening. Because with a district our size, when we get into the details, it's so many words,
Yeah,
know these people.
Yeah, and I think comms could help with that. And there are some simple, like we could simplify language, like, 30 minutes, 3 times a week, like this many minutes of extra instruction per year, right? Like we can bring it down to some very concrete, and then like whatever the outcomes are that we can boil down and make easily digestible. This many kids served, this many classrooms touched. There's lots of ways to, in kind of concrete ways, tell the story, I think.
Great.
Yeah, it's exciting. Yeah.
Thank you for joining us. Does
Yeah.
anyone have any other questions for Emily? I told her I only needed her for 15 minutes. So.
I never expect that to be true.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you guys. And really,
Thank you.
yeah, thank you for the vote of confidence by giving us the funds. We will bring back return on investment is our hope and our plan. All right.
Thanks.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.
When I was when we were down in Salem, lobbying last month, was it? Some parents were talking about how amazing the HIT program was and how it was helping their kids, and they thought they were losing it because of the foundation policy change.
Mhm.
But I'm seeing their school still on the list, so phew.
Mm. Right. And they may not even know why it was, so yeah, that's the big opportunity. It's a challenge and an opportunity to kind of get that message out. I wanted to maybe also we touch on the other investments we're making as far as the high school IXL and the food pantries. So do you have any other ideas, just seeds you want to plant for us in terms of like how we communicate that as well and like report back to the community on those? I know we want to make sure people understand the high impact tutoring, so that's the biggest chunk, but also like it's also doing other things. So just looking for ideas, and you don't have to have them now, but just wanted to plant that.
Robin, just one other error maybe I see on the fly with all the programs. So under food pantries, it says PPS survey families in Title One, then just says K dash. And I'm assuming it should probably say K dash 5.
Yeah, I noticed that this week, actually. Thank you. Yes, I'm gonna write that one down. It's it takes a village one, right? Yeah.
Takes a village to edit a document.
Yes. When you're cranking them out and trying to get them out by a deadline. The other item we had on the agenda was if people wanted to share any feedback on the process. This was the first time I hosted a parent advisory committee or committee that reports to the board. This is the first time we've had this committee, so everything was, pretty new this year. So, and also if you would prefer, I was thinking I could do an anonymous Google survey if that would be like a preferred way for people to give feedback. But I'm just wondering if anyone has any burning things that they want to be considered for next year.
From my point of view, Robin, I think because it was so new, everything just happened so quickly, and it was very crunch timing.
Mhm.
I would say that for future committees, I think having more than a month to really make kind of decisions would be ideal. Um, but I understand this is the first year, so I understand why that
Mhm.
happened.
I think that was my main feedback as well, is I wish we had more time just so that we could do more of a deep dive into like the presentations that we saw. I just felt like it was all rapid fire. And if we maybe had a presentation and then had a week as a group to kind of digest what that was before we had another presentation, kind of
Mhm.
making that cadence a little bit more so that we're just ingesting what's happening and it just doesn't feel so rapid. And so then when it's time to make a decision, I think folks will not feel just people will feel more solid in the decisions that they make or the conclusions that they come to. So that might make the last meeting a little more heated because everyone is grounded in their feelings, but at least we'll have more time to kind of digest. That was definitely a feeling that I was having. But in spite of that, I did enjoy being on the committee. I enjoyed learning. I learned a lot in that short month. Um, yes. And so I really appreciate um, all the presentations and the folks that took the time to make sure we understood um, in a small window because they had to, give us these micro presentations and kind of really spit out fast all that they do in a year in 30 minutes. And so, I appreciated every part of it, and I'm looking forward to next year actually.
The one other thing I was wondering, Robin, with the committee membership, like I know there was a member from each high school cluster, and then were all the members, I don't know if you would know, but did all the members just have students in the high school, or were there also representatives from the elementary schools or middle schools that were in that cluster?
Yeah, we tried to have a balance from elementary, middle, and high schools, but we did have a higher proportion of applications from parents in high schools. Um, so when the there was a board committee that reviewed the applicants, and so they were trying to balance it, like if in that, to make sure we had at least some of a variety of schools, that it wasn't all high school. But we also thought it was an advantage that at least high school parents like have probably experienced the K through 12 experience. So at least they weren't all elementary where they only had the view of an elementary. So, um, but I think more targeted outreach. I'm not sure we have a lot of middle school representation. Um, Um, so that might be something for next year too, as we fill the open spots. So we'll have some returning people and we'll have some more open spots. So being intentional of trying to fill with more variety of representatives.
Just to add on to what Sun brought up, I think a lot of the people who are not returning, like myself, next year, because we were just given 1-year terms, come from communities that historically did not have robust foundations. So do you know when when the new members, when that process is happening, when they'll be applying and selecting?
Um, no, Trina and I talked about maybe meeting over the summer and mapping out some plans for the committee because I can also find out how they do it for other committees, but I think we'll want to, probably start in September, to be able to do the recruitment um, and make sure. Yeah, and also we could ask for the help of people who were on the committee, to help, fill those spots as well.
And those positions will still be selected by board members.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then in terms of timeline, there will hopefully be like by September an advocacy slash fundraising committee formed. Is that a reasonable
Yes,
goal?
so that's more like to sit under the fund for PPS, but yes, and like to have a group that is active in the community. We had a small group this week with some parents to get their ideas and feedback on the structure, and we have some revisions to that, and we may not call it a committee. We're working on the word still, but we want to have something where like there's a liaison from every school that can be that source of information, the feedback loop from what's happening in the fund for PPS and this champion PPS schools and where these investments are and what are the opportunities to engage their community, and then having smaller work groups or committees that are focused on advocacy, fundraising, or different events, and then maybe a smaller group that kind of coordinates all of it, at a higher level and reports to the Fund for PPS Board of Directors. So
But the PAC will be making the recommendation of how the champion funds, which are presumably raised by the fundraising committee that is formed, how those will be, the recommendation to the board as to how those should be spent.
yes, and because that's in the policy. I think that what we did in this first year is really important, because my hope is that we continue these investments as we refine and get the data back. There may be some adjustments made, or like expansion to middle schools or things like that. But I don't want the community to have the idea that we're starting from a blank slate every year and like they have no idea where the money's going to go, because that's just not how fundraising works. Like, people need to know where their money's going. So we're really going to lean into what these investments are, and really have the PAC more analyze them and like help us with how we refine it, as opposed to like starting over. So hopefully that is like a shared shared, feeling that people have when they but you never know what can happen on committees. But that's how I'm kind of going into it, and then and that sort of like that feedback loop that would happen, and the parents that are on the PAC and sharing information is also contributing to the parents who are fundraising and doing advocacy, that we're all working together.
Right, yeah, because they have to be working together, or else the worst case scenario would be the fundraising committee raises all of this money and then the PAC goes a different direction than the fundraising committee wanted them to go. And
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
It's very exciting. I would say this year was, despite the limitations and the time crunch, was a real success. And a lot of that is owed to you, Robin. You did a lot of work behind the scenes, setting up meetings and stuff. So thank you for that. And thank you, Trina, for leading us, leading the troops.
I thank you. Thank you so much. And I really appreciate Robin this year. Kendrick has me fighting for my life right now. He's been really, I don't know, he's just all over the place right now. So, but I appreciate you guys. I appreciate this. And Susan, I always appreciate your insight. I always feel like I learn something new every time you come to the meeting. So I really, really appreciate you.
Thanks.
It's waiting.
Yeah, he says, I think we should be done, Mom. We've been doing this for an hour. Oh, well, I'm sorry that we didn't have more folks join. There was a few more that were planning to attend, but this time of year is tough. There's a lot of things happening at schools and all over. So we really appreciate your time and feedback and joining. And do you think it would be beneficial for me to send out a survey? Like, do you think there's more feedback that people may want to share?
Yeah, definitely, because there's so many people that couldn't make it tonight, and also there's some thoughts I'd probably like to put down in writing, and people don't have to do it. I think that's people might have some great ideas going forward. That
Sun might catch a few more errors, and
right.
you can send those my way, no problem.
Well, when it's the schools, and like we have to be careful.
Yeah.
We do, yes, we have a lot of we do a lot of editing for sure, but things get dropped in the process sometimes, putting them into graphics and all the things. We also did a lot of updates on the Fund for PPS website, if anyone has chance to look at that, and we'll continue to add that as we come up with some of these visuals to explain how it all works. And stay tuned for, hopefully you'll be hearing this, like a big megaphone coming at you in the next few months. So,
Great.
yeah.
Thank you,
Well,
everyone.
Yeah, thank you. Have a wonderful summer.
You too. Thank
Bye.
you. Bye.